otherwise known as leading from behind, rear-end leadership approach to foreign policy. And these axis of idiots, Obama, Clinton, now Kerry. Remember John Kerry's statement, I get a little upset when I hear politicians say how exceptional we are. The leftists over at the State Department and all the foreign policy wonks around Washington and elsewhere. These people are either double agents working for the other side, or somehow these policies have to be part of the fundamental transformation of this country. You know, Russians shooting down civilian airliners flying through their airspace is nothing new. A close associate of this program and of the We the People 1787, Congressman Dr. Larry McDonald, was on Korean Air Flight 007, shot down over the Soviet airspace by a Russian fighter jet on September 1st, 1983. Then President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation 4 days later. And I want you to listen to the difference in some excerpts from the two speeches from Ronald Reagan and Barack Hussein Obama. I want to play Ronald Reagan first, but listen to Ronald Reagan's tone and what he had to say about the Soviet Empire.
And make no mistake about it, this attack was not just against ourselves or the Republic of Korea. This was the Soviet Union against the world and the moral precepts which guide human relations among people everywhere. It was an act of barbarism, born of a society which wantonly disregards individual rights and the value of human life and seeks constantly to expand and dominate other nations.
Well, Reagan was criticized for not doing enough to punish the Soviets or the Russians. But his foreign policies and his many speeches labeling the Soviets for what they were, the focus of evil in the modern world, Reagan's words, helped bring about the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, I want you to listen to the excerpt from Barack Hussein Obama on Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 yesterday.
So now's, I think, a somber and appropriate time for all of us to step back and take a hard look at what has happened. Violence and conflict inevitably lead to unforeseen consequences. Russia, these separatists, and Ukraine all have the capacity to put an end to the fighting. Meanwhile, the United States is going to continue to lead efforts within the world community to de-escalate the situation, to stand up for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and to support the people of Ukraine as they courageously work to strengthen their democracy and make their own decisions about how they should move forward.
I'm not sure how to take that. If you listen to that portion where he says, to de-escalate the situation, to stand up for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, referencing the United States, and to support people of Ukraine as they courageously work to strengthen their democracy. I mean, Vladimir Putin must be shaken in his jackboots. Obama won't even stand up for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the United States. And he's telling Putin, we're going to stand up for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Ukraine? How? We're not doing it here. We can't even put down an invasion of children. And we're going to stand up for some other country's sovereignty and territorial integrity? Our president he's got to be hallucinating. We're being invaded by children, and he's telling this thug Putin that we're going to somehow stand up for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Ukraine? If we're not the laughingstock now, we will be soon. It's time to rout these progressives. I mean, have you had enough of the weak-kneed progressives? The I know better than you progressives? The same people who believe the solution to all of our problems begins with the U.S. Department of blah, blah, blah. I mean, what program is he going to put in place to stop Putin? He's not going to do anything. You know, you've got to pay attention to what's happening politically in this country. These progressives in the Progressive Caucus is one group that we need to put our sights on and defeat in this upcoming election. I'm in hopes that the progressive Corrine Brown can be defeated in November. There are two candidates running against Corrine Brown, Twee Low and Glo Smith. I hope to have Glo Smith on here in a few minutes. I want her to discuss what her platform is and how she plans to defeat Corrine Brown.
We've left her a message, and hopefully she'll be calling in shortly.
Excellent. This progressive Corrine Brown has been in office for 20 years, and she remains in office. And if you don't pay attention in the 5th District, she will win again. While we're waiting for Glo, I want to move on to another item that came up, which ought to enrage every American, because it's going to result in another department of blah, blah, blah. And that is the talking shopping cart. And what this is a program through the Department of Agriculture, United States Department of Agriculture. Talking shopping carts. It sounds like the brainchild of some entrepreneur, but it's the brain dead child of Michelle Obama and the USDA. According to the Washington Free Beacon, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is suggesting major changes to grocery stores to nudge Americans to purchase healthier foods when they shop. The agency commissioned an expert panel to make recommendations on how to guide the more than 47 million Americans on food stamps into spending their benefits on fruits and vegetables. The group released an 80-page report this month presenting their ideas, which include talking shopping carts and a marketing strategy for grocery chains that would feature better store lighting for healthier items. I mean, is there nowhere that the federal government won't interfere in the free enterprise system? The My Grocery Cart would provide dividers for shoppers to make sure they are selecting enough items to, in each My Plate category, the USDA's food icon. My Cart is a non-financial approach that would use behavioral economics to encourage healthier purchases by any consumer, including SNAP participants, the report said. I don't buy it's a non-financial approach. It's going to cost grocery stores approximately $30,000 each to put in these talking grocery carts. The USDA said the ideas are intended to change the choice architecture of the food retail environment to make healthier choices more prominent, which is in line with First Lady Michelle Obama's stated second-term agenda to impact the nature of food in grocery stores. And I will add, fundamentally change the way we buy food. When we come back, we're going to investigate this story and some more of the insanity of this feral government. You're listening to The Resistance. Forrest Wilson. Our lines are open. 904-222-TALK, 904-222-8255. We'll be right back.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
And fundamentally change the way we buy food. This is Michelle Obama. Nobody elected Michelle Obama. Nobody wants her selecting their food choices for them. I mean, this is the epitome of an Orwellian program. If this is somehow implemented, which I hope it fails, food stamp recipients would be immediately identified by their color-coded shopping carts. I mean, who in their right mind is going to pick up one of these things other than potentially a SNAP recipient? Because by doing so, they're going to get bennies and rewards for making these healthy food choices. I want to take a call. And this is George from Arlington on line 2. Go ahead, George.
Yes, good day. There is a way for the state legislatures in the near future to bind up all the federal bureaucrats. A number of states have already passed the participation paperwork, et cetera, to have a constitutional convention, state-initiated constitutional convention. It will probably be held only to do a balanced budget, but there is a second way to deal with bureaucrats other than have people elected to Congress. There's an old joke: no one's life, liberty, or property is safe when Congress is in session. We need a constitutional amendment which basically says you cannot have a bureaucratic rule enforced unless it goes to a jury. That basically is, or it pushes more towards the property or your savings, etc., your money that you have in your corporation, the money that you put in your house when they declare it a location where you cannot build a house or whatever. But think of the thousands and thousands of regulations coming down where bureaucrats are playing the part of judges, legislature, and executive branch. And if you say you absolutely have to have a trial by jury, if it's called for by the target, then the IRS loses a massive amount of its power. The EPA loses a massive amount of its power. Now, the devil is in the details of how you word it, but we need a constitutional amendment.
But, George, don't you think we're far more likely to win some elections with what's going on now, as opposed to a constitutional convention?
That's short term. The progressives never give up. 20 years from now, people will forget, and the same thing will happen. We need a constitutional amendment which will force a fully informed jury for even a $25 fine if you require it. A fully informed jury can say the law is wrong, not just that the law in this case is wrong.
They can do that now. Yes,
it's called a fully informed jury. And that's what we need. We need a constitutional amendment which says that if the target of the IRS, the target of the EPA, target of any federal bureaucracy says they want a trial by jury, they get a trial by jury.
Well, George, thank you for the call. I'm sure there's a lot of solutions, but I think the most immediate solution is to get rid of some progressives, starting with Corrine Brown. But I want to finish this piece on this talking shopping cart. I mean, this is just another example of the progressive knows better than you. In this case, the progressive Michelle Obama. Let me bring in our guest. Do we have our guest yet? No, still waiting for Glo Smith. I do want to invite Corrine Brown onto the show. I would love to have her. I'm very interested in her views and what she thinks about the State of the Union at this juncture in the Obama administration. But these talking shopping carts, I mean, who do you think is going to pay for this? This USDA report says it's a non-financial approach, but it's estimated each store would have to pony up about $30,000 to provide these talking shopping carts. So to offset these additional costs of the carts, food prices would necessarily have to rise, meaning less choice. Also, the cost of the food stamp program will fundamentally change as they will entice the recipients with these bonuses like movie tickets. I mean, who's paying for that? And freebies to encourage compliance with the government-approved menu items. I mean, is this kind of, I don't know, creepy, crazy progressive to you? Why don't these geniuses just restrict the foods they find offensive and approve fresh food and government-approved menu items for the SNAP recipient? Well, I think it's deeper than that. I think it's because they need to employ ever more people in the government bureaucracy. The feds want grocery store employees to serve as government ambassadors who can redirect food stampers toward healthy items by explaining the various incentive programs and the nutritional information. Kind of like a navigator for Obamacare. Now we're going to have navigators within the grocery store. And you can bet the grocers will need to be subsidized to employ the food ambassador, since if you really look hard at the financial structure of grocery stores, they operate on razor-thin margins. You know, kind of like the health care insurers, just another brain-dead idea from unelected bureaucrats and our dear First Lady. We'll wind up subsidizing the grocer. Certainly we're going to subsidize the food stamp recipient for their new bennies, their shopping carts, and their movie tickets. Just restrict what people can buy, like cigarettes and alcohol is restricted right now from SNAP benefits. The last thing we need is just another U.S. Department of blah, blah, blah to administer the talking shopping cart program. I don't know what to say at this point about this whole thing, but if there's a way to resist, you need to do it. Corrine Brown, come on this show and let's talk about the talking shopping cart and all the other issues on the table. As I was preparing for this show today, something hit me, and it was kind of at the last minute, and it was on the Daily Signal. Lawmakers throw light on secretive Operation Choke Point. Have you ever heard of Operation Choke Point? Well, just like the grocers, these bureaucrats are forever thinking up ways to impede business. Operation Choke Point is just that. Operation Choke Point, so dubbed by the Department of Justice officials under Attorney General Eric Holder, seeks to weed out businesses from the marketplace that the Obama administration considers objectionable. According to the Wall Street Journal, it was an outgrowth of the Financial Fraud Task Force established by President Obama's executive order early in his first term. Let me tell you something about what's going on here. In Obama's first term, my business was targeted. I spent 10 years building this business, and I shut it down because of Frank Dodd. But before I shut it down, as I spoke out on the radio 4 years ago, I found myself involved in 4 simultaneous audits, and it occurred to me at that time that there's absolutely no way that my government could possibly be involved in a shakedown of my business. This has got to be a coincidence. I want to tell you when I return from the break here in a few minutes, exactly the government agency that was involved in one of the audits. There were 4 simultaneous audits. I operated in 5 states. 3 states and 1 government agency decided to audit my business. Now, there had never been a consumer complaint. Not one. But this government agency, without jurisdiction where my business was located, decided they were going to do an audit. And I spent 6 months exchanging bankers' boxes full of data with this particular government agency. I want to tell you about it right at this moment. You're going to have to listen through the break, and I'll explain to you who this government agency was. But this is part of Operation Choke Point. Initially, in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, officials targeted small-dollar non-bank lenders, but it grew to include other legal, legitimate businesses such as gun dealers and tobacco vendors at Walmart and Bass Pro Shops. Representative Daryl Issa, speaking on Operation Choke Point at the Cato Institute, called it proactive, progressive activity by government against banks and other legitimate businesses. And let me tell you, it didn't put me out of business because after sifting through all of my records, this particular agency found nothing. I ran a legitimate business under the laws of the United States, and I did so in a way that created harmony with my customers. In other words, I had not one consumer complaint. When I come back from the break, I'm going to tell you who that government agency was. You're listening to The Resistance, AM 600 WBOB, The Answer. Lines are open. 904-222-TALK, 904-222-8255. We'll be right back.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
And we're back. Look, I've warned about the takeover of American business by federal regulation and the agencies of the federal government. It's been going on for a long time, and it started a long time before my business was ultimately taken over. I mean, we've got crony capitalism at the top, where the crony capitalists privatize their profits and socialize their losses. In other words, putting their losses back on the taxpayer. And when I started looking into this, it really woke me up. Frank Dodd was the end of my business. Government regulation. I closed a business I spent 10 years building. 10 years. And in that 10 years, not one consumer complaint. Thousands of customers. I operated in 5 states. The federal government's gone industry by industry, inflicting this regulation after regulation. Where there were none, they created the Department of blah, blah, blah to inflict their agenda. And it continues. 530 agencies of the federal government and counting, over 1 million regulations. And we have this. Operation Choke Point. It's designed to dismantle businesses that the Obama administration finds objectionable. So, I'm on the air 4 years ago, and I'm doing a show, and I'm really taking the Obama administration to task over Obamacare and the takeover of private health insurance. And I get these audits, simultaneous, all at the same time. 3 state agencies and 1 federal agency. Remember, I'm operating in 5 states. One of the federal agencies is the Department of Housing and Urban Development, because my business was a HUD-approved mortgage lender. Not a broker, not a bank, non-bank financial institution. But I guess it was an objectionable business, because here I am working these audits with really a relatively small staff. At the peak, I think we had 50 employees, so the staff wasn't large. And this audit comes in from Cook County, Chicago, Illinois. I'd never done business in Illinois. Not one mortgage, ever. But Cook County, Illinois, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, right there in Chicago, saw fit to audit my business. Now, if you look on HUD's website, I don't want you to go there, but if you did, you'd find out that HUD has field offices scattered throughout the country in most of the major metropolitan areas. And those field offices, by HUD's own admission, have jurisdiction within certain counties only. Now, the county where my business was organized and headquartered received no notification from HUD, not a phone call. But I get this inquiry from Chicago. Never done business in Chicago. No people in Chicago. No licensure in Chicago. No relationship whatsoever in Chicago. And I spend the next 6 months with HUD officials from Chicago via email and the telephone, working me and my business, exchanging bankers' boxes and making demands on all of these particular mortgages that I'd done through HUD, so that they could sift through to see if they could find any violations or regulations that I might have, I don't know, somehow missed or violated. I'm not sure if my business was objectionable or what I was saying on the air was objectionable. But what I was saying was the truth. The government has no business in the healthcare business. The government has no business in business. The government's there, number one, primarily, to protect the United States from invasion. That's one of the enumerated powers, military defense. And yet here I am, sitting there with a Department of HUD official from Chicago, sifting through my books and records. And this went on for 6 months. And finally, after all of that, I got a letter from HUD basically stating that they found no violation of any federal law or any problem with the, I don't know how many mortgages they sifted through, or any of my books and records. 6 months later, it occupied a full-time person, one of my people, full-time to deal with these bureaucrats. So was it what I was saying that was objectionable, or was it something to do with the type of business I was operating? Remember, they were targeting small dollar, non-bank lenders, such as me. But this Operation Choke Point grew to include other legal legitimate businesses, such as gun dealers and tobacco vendors. I mean, how is a gun dealer objectionable to the Obama administration? Isn't that a constitutional right? The Second Amendment? The right to bear arms? And yet Eric Holder and this administration find gun dealers objectionable. I can understand them being upset with what I had to say. Many were upset. But how many right now are upset about the fact that their health insurance is being canceled and they can no longer see the doctor of their choice? If this keeps up, we won't even be able to choose the food we want at the grocery store, SNAP or otherwise. Our lines are open, 904-222-TALK, 904-222-TALK, 904-222-8255. You're welcome to call in and talk about this or any of the other issues facing this great nation. Apparently, House Republicans have already passed legislation prohibiting funding for Operation Choke Point. This week, the Justice Department initiative comes under further scrutiny in 3 House settings. One official at Justice, quoted anonymously in the Wall Street Journal report last summer, said the initiative was intended to change the structures within the financial system that allow all kinds of fraudulent merchants to operate, with the intent of choking them off from the very air they need to survive. I mean, does this sound like a Republican, small r, form of government? Does the Justice Department sound like the Department of Justice or the Department of Injustice? By air, the DOJ means money. The Obama administration uses Operation Choke Point to intimidate banks from doing businesses with merchants it deems high risk, Representative Darrell Issa and other critics say. I say it's time to end the progressive domination of our government, lest we be forced into compliance, and it's coming. The only thing that I can say, the only saving grace from these progressives is the fact that apparently they are somewhat incompetent on a broad spectrum of initiatives. Just take the VA. I mean, we're the progressives in solving the VA debacle. The progressives created the Benghazi incident by arming certain rebel groups. And it's on and on and on throughout all of these feral agencies of the federal government. I want to shift gears on you here. This is a tweet from the progressive Congressman John Lewis, Democrat, Georgia. You know, the other thing we ought to stop doing is calling them Democrats. Instead of a D after their name, we need to put a P. Anybody in the Democrat Party has got to be who's not a progressive, and I'm not sure there are any non-progressive Democrats. I believe they're all progressive, so why don't we just start putting a P after their name? Anyways, in a tweet from Congressman John Lewis, we are all connected. We can't just build a wall or fence and say no more. This is America. Our doors are open. You mean our borders are open, John? I mean, really. So, Congressman Lewis, if walls and fences don't work, why do we have a fence around the White House? What purpose does that serve? We need to take that fence down. Comments and tweets from the progressives in our Congress, they really help us understand the threat to our national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Not by the children from South and Central America, but by or from the progressives all throughout our feral government. So, Congressman Lewis, John Lewis with a P behind your name, how many Guatemalan children can you take into your home? Has a single progressive, for that matter, offered to take any children from this invasion? I've not heard a single politician offer to take in any of these children, Republican or Democrat. But this rush to amnesty that they're all enamored with, I believe it's an attempt to gain voters, Republican and Democrat. I mean, you know, you've got the Democrats rushing to get these people amnestized, and then the Republicans are saying, well, wait a minute. We can't go against this because if we talk against amnesty, then we might not win the next election. They're competing for the illegal vote. I mean, you can bet on it. Once they grant amnesty, the next item on the agenda is going to be naturalization. And once a citizen, you have the right to vote, travel with a U.S. passport, work as a federal employee, and so much more. But it's the voting, isn't it? It's the voting they're after. So if I'm a Republican office holder, I can't let the Democrat office holders gain a foothold with these illegals. No, I have to make sure I don't offend these people. After all, I'm going to face them at the polls in future elections. I mean, is this sick and a real threat to this nation? Republicans and Democrats? Can you imagine a complete progressive-dominated federal government? Progressive Republicans and progressive Democrats? You know, it may already be a reality. I've asked many of our guests, are we socialists? Some say yes, some say no, we're communists. I want to bring in Glo Smith. I want to get her input on this. Glo Smith is running for the 5th Congressional District against, she's in a primary against Twilo. Both of them fine women, I might add. And they will be running, one of them, against Corrine Brown in the election coming up. Let me bring in Glo. Glo, how are you?
Hello, and how are you doing?
Good. You must be busy on the campaign trail.
We have. We've already been to 3 events this morning, and I've got 2 more when I finish with you this afternoon. Thank you so much, and my apologies to you and to your listening audience. The time just got away from us, and literally I was in the car and got a tweet. You're supposed to be on the radio.
Listen, no worries, no worries. I'm glad you could make it because there's so much going on in the world today, and I've read a lot about you and your background, and it's quite impressive. You seem like a fine woman, and I'm very hopeful on your candidacy.
Well, thank you very much. I have spent my life in this district. I was born in this district. Through all the members and the redrawing of the district in the last 50 years, I've always lived in this district, and I happen to love the constituents and the people, and I love our state, and I love our country.
Well, and I couldn't agree with you more. I feel the same way, although I don't live in the 5th District, and I want to get into some of the issues, but I've got to take a short break. But when we come back, I'd like for you to talk about taxes, Obamacare, and some of the other issues facing Americans in this country. You're listening to Glo Smith, 5th Congressional District candidate. This is The Resistance. Forrest Wilson, AM 600. We'll be right back.
Let's return to We the People with Forrest Wilson. Once again, here's Forrest.
And we're talking with Glo Smith. She's the 5th congressional candidate in a primary, but ultimately hoping to run against Corrine Brown. Glo, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Forrest.
So what can we do about things like, for example, Obamacare? As a congresswoman, if you were to make it all the way, what could we do, and what would you do to help end the disaster of Obamacare?
Well, I think it's important that we get behind Republican-led efforts to defund and replace Obamacare. There are a few things that we can work with, the pre-existing conditions, for example, but I think that we need to make sure that we empower patients and that we protect that relationship between the patient and their private doctors. Additionally, we must be able to have portability of this insurance across state lines. We all know that competition will not only drive the price down, but it would bring the quality of services being offered up. So those are a couple of the ideas, but I think right now we need to be funded. We need to give states more powers when it's concerning Obamacare and school and other issues, but it's important that we look at what the people want and address those issues without taking over such a large portion of our economy.
So you would vote to repeal Obamacare if they drafted that?
I would, but more importantly, I do not know if that's going to happen, but I do think that we need to defund it. Look at the money that we've wasted between the system, creating the system. I still don't know and can't get a straight answer if it's 100% complete on the back end. I don't know that. But I definitely think that we need to defund it, and then we need to get behind some Republican-led efforts to replace this entire mess. But we must put it back in the power. We must put it back in the hands of the people and empower our patients to make decisions for themselves. The invasion on our privacy. I talk about Obamacare, and most people think it's only about health care. But quite frankly, what scares me is the intrusion of the federal government into our private lives, where most people don't go. We don't really talk about our health issues in detail with our family members sometimes. Why in the world would we want to allow the federal government to have that access? So that's concerning to me. The cost is concerning to me. The fact that this president will not allow us to purchase insurance across state lines is concerning to me. And let me tell you what concerns me even more. I was one of those Republicans who went to the places where people were enrolling, because I wanted to see for myself what was happening. And as far as I tell you, for as many people that was enrolling in Obamacare, you best believe there was a system in place to enroll them and to make sure they registered to vote. And I mean, it was down pat, and that's a larger concern to me, because then I got to see again for myself firsthand that it was not about health care, but it's about the vote. And we as Republicans better wake up. We better understand what the Democrats are doing. I'm in places all the time, and I see what they're doing, whether it's outside of a school, outside of a church, outside of community events that's going on. They are registering people to vote, and we're not there. We're missing in action. And do you know what's scary? The fact that they are registering to vote as Democrats is very scary. And so we've got to.
That seems like a violation of some sort of federal law when they get involved. They cross over from registering people for Obamacare to registering them to vote.
Well, it should be, but we all know that that's part of it. And that, to me, that is an invasion. And I think that we have got to step up and say, what does this have to do with my health care? And that's why it's important that the listening audience and the Americans understand that Obamacare is not only about health care. I truly believe that that's just a cover-up. What's more concerning to me is the takeover of our health care system, the invasion of government into our personal lives, where we can't even have the doctors that we want and have that privacy that should be protected.
Yes, could you imagine a scenario where the government has this database and they've got this information on, for example, you, and you become effective opposition, but you're also in desperate need of some sort of health care, life-saving medicine, for example. But they know all these things about you, and they target you specifically with this information, much like the IRS and Lois Lerner have done with the Tea Party groups. This is the danger of the government and their ever-increasing database on the citizen. This government knows more about the average citizen than any government, totalitarian or otherwise, has known about the citizen throughout history. Right now.
I'm sorry. Well, what's worse is not only the targeting, but what if they decide that because of certain criteria that you've met or certain things going on in your personal life that you will no longer have access to the medical care that you need? Maybe you're a senior adult, or maybe you're someone that's not worth saving. Maybe they deem you not worth the medical attention that you need. So I think it's important that as we talk about these issues, that people understand, and our constituents in the 5th District understand, the invasion that is happening is not beneficial. We have a Constitution that does protect us against this. And I want to make sure that the constituents in our district are aware of it, that we're out there educating people, not only about my campaign, and of course, people can go visit gloforcongress.com and find out more about us, but we have some serious issues that we have to talk about, and that we have to figure out a way to work around what the Democrats are doing. They're embedded in the communities. Their ideology is wrong. We must cross over and have conversations with people who may not know what a conservative is and may not understand why we believe in protecting and defending our Constitution or individual responsibility or protecting life. Whatever it is, those conservative values have to be expanded upon, not only in this district, District 5. As you know, it's a majority-minority district. It's heavily Democrat. It's heavily African-American. And we have to make sure that we educate not only African-Americans, but everyone about the serious invasion of the government, whether it's Obamacare. Look what's happening. You talked about immigration. I believe that not only is that a huge distraction, but I would like to see Congress tighten their purse strings, and I would like to see them come up with some deals to sanction these countries. Whatever money we send to these countries, we need to recoup the cost. The American taxpayers should not have to carry this burden along for all of these children and these adults that are coming into this country.
Glo, we could go on literally for hours, and unfortunately our hour is done. But I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's give us your website again for those that want to help your campaign.
Right. Please go to www.gloforcongress.com. Go. And I tell people, vet me. Vet the other candidate in this primary. And you have to decide who has the most experience, who has the qualification, and who's going to be in a better position to challenge Corrine Brown come November. That's what's important, that you know your candidates, and whichever you decide to get behind, that you support us. Either one of us is better than Corrine Brown any day. And so I would love it if your listening audience would go and Google Glo Smith, check me out, vet me, call me, and please consider sending a donation in. We are in dire need of funds. We must raise funds in order to do what we need to do throughout this district.
Best of luck to you, Glo. Thank you again.
Thank
You've listened to The Resistance, AM 600 WBOB, Forrest Wilson. We'll be back next week.